Alrighty guys, so this video is going to be talking about performing function operations. And so we're going to be talking about, of course, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division of functions, okay? So starting things off, if we were talking about addition, okay? And I was giving you notation that looks like this. That means we're going to be doing f of x plus g of x, okay? If we're talking about subtraction, that means we have f minus g of x, and that's going to be f of x minus g of x. And then we have multiplication, okay? And that's going to be f g of x is equal to f of x times g of x, okay? And then last but not least, division. And that's going to be f divided by g of x is equal to f of x divided by g of x. So that right there is the notation that you're going to be seeing. Now let me go ahead and do some examples of each that will kind of give you an idea of how to handle these types of problems. So let me erase this. So let's go ahead and start with addition. So say we had f plus g of x, and we said that f of x, okay, was going to be equal to 5x, and we said g of x is going to be equal to x plus 2. So if I were to do f plus g, that will give me f of x plus g of x. So that's 5x plus x plus 2. So all we have to do is combine like terms, and that gives me 6x plus 2, and that is f plus g of x. Okay? And there you go. Now let me back up, and let's go ahead and do where we subtract. Okay, so let's now look at subtraction. Let me change the symbol there. So now we have subtraction. Let's use the same f of x and g of x. That means f of x minus g of x is going to be equal to 5x minus x plus 2. Notice how I had to put parentheses around it because we got to distribute that negative to everything. So that means I've got 5x minus x minus 2. So that's going to give me 4x minus 2, and that's going to be f minus g of x. Okay? So far, so good. It's not so bad, right? So now, let's go ahead and do multiplication. Okay, so let me erase this. And I'll have to go back. And I want to keep the same f of x. So let me do f g of x. So that's going to be f of x times g of x, which is equal to 5x times x plus 2. So I've got to distribute this 5x in, so that gives me 5x squared plus 10x, and that is f times g of x. Nothing to it. Okay, let's look at a division. Okay, so let's do that. Get rid of all this. So for this one right here, we now have f divided by g of x, and that's going to be f of x divided by g of x. So we've got 5x over x plus 2. And of course, if we could simplify this or do anything with it, we would, but we can't simplify or do anything, so we just leave it as is, okay? So that is kind of a basic understanding of adding, subtracting, dividing, and all that good stuff. But now let me take it to the next level, okay? So let me erase this. Alrighty, so let's go back to addition, okay? And let's assume, let's say f of x is equal to 3 square root of x, and g of x is equal to negative 10 square root of x, okay? So in this scenario, if I'm wanting to add these, that's going to be f plus g of x is equal to f of x plus g of x. And so that's equal to 3 square root of x plus my negative 10 square root of x. Now, of course, the addition and the subtraction, they go ahead and multiply out to a subtraction, right? And so we end up with 3 square root of x minus 10 square root of x. And we can go ahead and actually subtract these out because they have the same square root of x. So we end up with negative 7 square root of x, okay? So there's a more complex one for you. Now let's go ahead and take a look at maybe a subtraction, okay? So as you can see, guys, you're going to have to remember all your rules when it comes to adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing functions, okay? Because the truth is there's so many possibilities that I can't probably cover them all, but I just want to expose you to some other ones. So subtracting, let's try this one. Let's do f of x is equal to 3x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5. And let's assume g of x is equal to x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4x minus 2. Okay? So, looking at this right here, okay, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to do our f minus g, okay, of x, and that's equal to f of x minus g of x. And what that looks like is you have 3x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5 minus, now you're going to put parentheses around the entire g because you got to distribute that negative. So you have x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4x minus 2. So in reality, what we have here is 3x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5 minus x cubed plus 3x squared minus 4x plus 2, because that negative went to each person. Now we have to combine like terms. The x cubes can combine to 2x cubed, and then we have the squareds can combine to plus x squared because negative 2 plus 3 is just 1. Now the x doesn't have anybody, so I have minus 4x, but the 5 and the 2 can combine to make 7. And then there you have it. There is your official answer, okay? Now I want to take it to the next level and say, maybe I wanted to go ahead and do f minus g, not just of x, but of, let's say, let's keep it simple, let's do negative 2, okay? Remember, I taught you guys that if I put a negative 2 there, that means I have to replace every single x with a negative 2. So that means I have 2 of negative 2 cubed plus negative 2 squared minus 4 times negative 2 and then plus 7, okay? Now you'll notice I'm plugging this into the fully refined version, right? I plugged it in after I went ahead and subtracted both functions because if you were to plug it into where it was not simplified, you'd have a lot more x's to deal with, okay? So looking at this right here, negative 2 cubed, that's going to give us a negative 8. So I've got 2 times negative 8. And then negative 2 squared, that's a 4. It's positive, so it's plus 4. Negative 4 times negative 2 is an 8. And then, of course, 7. Okay, so simplifying it further, you've got negative 16. And then 8 plus 7 is 15. Plus 4, that's going to be 19. So you should end up with an answer of just 3. So if you have f minus g of negative 2, that's going to equal 3, okay? So f minus g of negative 2 is equal to 3. So you'll notice the process for that is to first subtract the functions, then input the negative 2. Don't put the negative 2 in first, okay? So let me pause this erase, and let's do another problem. Let's say I had an f of x that's equal to 6x, and then a g of x that's equal to x to the 3/4, okay? So say I wanted to do division now, okay? So if I did f of g, okay, or f divided by g of x, okay, that would equal 6x over x to the 3/4. Now remember, when you have this type of setup and you have the same base, they both have x, you're going to subtract, right? So technically what we're looking at here is 6x. Now that's to the 1 power minus 3/4. Well, 1 minus 3/4, that's just 6x to the 1/4, okay? Now, that would be your answer, okay? Now let's do a multiplication one, okay? And also for this multiplication one, I'll change it to something other than x. So for multiplication, let's do f of x is equal to the square root of x, and g of x is equal to, let's do x squared, okay? So then you have yourself f times g, and I want to not just analyze it just at x, but I want to analyze it when x is 9. Okay, let's see what happens when x is 9. So the first thing you do is first figure out what f times g of x is, and then put in the 9, okay? So don't do that 9 yet. So we have the square root of x, and I'm going to change it x to the 1/2 times x squared. Now the reason for that is because this will allow me to be able to add these exponents a lot easier, because when multiplying you add the exponent. So what this ends up being is x to the 1/2 plus 2. And so when you go ahead and do 2 plus 1/2, that should give you x to the 5/2, okay? Now, remember, we want to also figure out, and of course that's f times g of x. So if that is true, then f times g of 9, that's going to be when you have 9 raised to the 5/2, okay? So what you have to do is you have to do the square root of 9 and then raise it to the 5th power, okay? So looking at this right here, the square root of 9 is 3. 3 to the 5th power. Let me go ahead and type that into my calculator real quick. And I got 243, okay? So the official answer for this, okay, is that we had f times g of 9 is equal to 243. But notice how I did this. Step 1, you solve, okay, the f times g of x, okay? Then step 2, input the new value for x. And you do that for each one. So whether you're adding, you're subtracting, you're dividing, or multiplying, you input that new value for x after you go ahead and solve for it, okay? And so that right there should go ahead and give you an idea of what you should be doing for this homework, okay? It's very straightforward just like that, but you will have to know a lot of these rules, okay? Because I could do endless problems of all the other sections, but you're going to have to make sure you know your adding radicals, adding your rational exponents, and so make sure you're ready for that. But let me know if you need anything or need help, okay? That's it for this video, guys.